Are we waiting for anybody else to join us? Okay. Oh, Mark is typing. Okay, do we want to give it 5 more minutes? Can I use these buttons too?
I think so, yes. No, maybe not.
Okay. Hi, everybody. We're back. Um, Hopefully everybody is here, but I just wanted to make sure that I gave people enough time. So this is Rebecca, and I am the Director of Recovery Support Services for CCAR. Um, I actually was the Telephone Recovery Support Manager about 4 years ago. So I'm very familiar with our program. So I'm very happy that I am on this recording with everybody, and you know, I'm very happy that you all are going to implement a telephone recovery support program. So bear with me. I am at Stacy's computer, and she has this crazy looking mouse that uh, it's going to take me a little bit to kind of figure out how to use it. So let's get started. And I would like people to interact. So feel free to, type in the chat box. Um, I hope everybody can hear me. If you can just type in that you can hear me, I will get started. Okay, excellent. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Now, talking to the person that set this up, I understand that there's a mix of volunteers as well as recovery center staff. Is that correct? It doesn't really matter, if you're a staff or if you're a volunteer. This training will have something for each of you. So a little bit about the telephone recovery support program. So it's a very simple program, and it's built on that simple concept of one addict or alcoholic reaching out to another. So what it is that volunteers will call recoveries once a week to offer support, encouragement, and information about resources to help them maintain their recovery. So for your volunteers at the recovery community centers, it's a really great way for them to get involved and to give back, because it feels good to help somebody else in their recovery. And it's a great way to help people that may not have access to other groups or support groups, as a way to help them connect to the larger recovery community. Again, it's a really simple program, but it is very effective. CCAR has been doing telephone recovery support calls since 2005. So we've been doing this program for 13 years, and the feedback that I get is just very positive, both from the people that we call as well as from our volunteers. So I think that this program really belongs in the Recovery Community Center. Does anybody have any questions at this point? What I'll probably do is at the end of each slide, I will ask if people have questions. That way, I can make sure that everybody is getting a chance to kind of interact. Okay, so I don't see any questions at this point. I will move to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, So, really, well trained volunteers are a huge part of this program. So, the more training and support that you're giving to your volunteers, the better the program is going to work. So, I get asked a lot about the so called the clean time requirement that we have. So at CCAR, one of our cornerstone philosophies is that you're in recovery when you say you are. And our volunteers are, you know, anybody that comes into our center and wants to be a volunteer, we will support them. So this is a program for our volunteers, and there is no clean time requirement, but we do ask that our volunteers at least do a volunteer orientation, and maybe a couple of other groups before they start making telephone recovery support calls. So even though we don't have a clean time requirement, usually our volunteers are probably, anywhere from, 30 days in recovery to, multiple years in recovery. This isn't just for volunteers that are new to recovery. It's also for volunteers that have sustained recovery that are looking for opportunities to give back. So um, for us, it really keeps our volunteers engaged in the recovery process. They're able to, support people that they're calling. They're able to, give them encouragement and connect them to the resources that they need. So recovery resources. Everybody has different ways to find resources. So what we used to do was that we would have a resource book, and we would have copies of this resource book or resource manual, throughout the recovery center. What we found was this was not only cumbersome, it was very hard to keep it updated. So we do have a short kind of list for recovery resources, such as, some detoxes in the area. We'll have the number for the AA hotline or the NA hotline. We'll have some local numbers for like maybe the food pantry or things like that. But for the most part, what I have our volunteers do is to do a Google search or, some other type of search to find somebody the resources. Now, our volunteers aren't necessarily calling people that are in their area. In Connecticut, this is a statewide program. So we have 3 recovery centers in Connecticut: Willimantic, Hartford, and Bridgeport. So our volunteers in Bridgeport could be calling, somebody in Connecticut that lives nowhere near Bridgeport, right? So unless they're intimately familiar with that community, they're not going to know offhand who, how what resources are available. So for them, it's a lot easier to either do a Google search, or we also have something in Connecticut called 211, which is like the info hotline. I also ask our volunteers that if they can't locate the resource for that person, to have that person call 211, because it's a really great resource. They have tons of different resources, so that's always an option. A lot of times, though, for our volunteers, it's really about listening to that person, encouraging that person in their recovery, and acting as a support to that person. So it's really non-judgmental. We believe in multiple pathways, um, and it's very helpful for volunteers to understand that and to try to keep their own particular pathway, um, kind of aside from that conversation. So, what I say to our volunteers is, you're welcome to share your own story, um, if you feel that person is interested in hearing about it or it could benefit that person. These calls are really about listening and just providing encouragement and support. So it looks like in St. Louis, you do have a website, that has a lot of resources. I don't know if your volunteers are uh, able to access a computer to find these resources easily, but most people have smartphones or whatever. So um, I think that would definitely work to find resources. Did somebody else have something that they wanted to share? Okay, could I ask a quick question? So, are you all in the St. Louis area? Everybody that's on this webinar right now? Okay. David, where are you? Okay, so Kansas City and Springfield. Okay. And I'm just going to assume that you all have some local resources, uh, that you can access to find ways to help the people that you're going to be calling. So it looks like somebody's mic isn't working here. Oh, okay. So you have a paper form. Okay. Excellent. And again, sometimes it's about providing resources for people, but a lot of times it's just about listening to them and just supporting them in their recovery. So again, non-judgmental, multiple pathways. For your volunteers, it's a really great way to learn transferable job skills, and it also gives a sense of purpose and community. So let me move on to the next slide. Okay, excellent. So a little bit about volunteer roles and responsibilities. So your volunteers are going to be providing recovery support on a weekly basis. Um, Again, it's about letting those recoveries choose their own path to recovery and supporting them on that pathway, whatever it is. It's really about listening and encouraging their strengths and achievements, identifying possible barriers and suggesting ways that they can kind of overcome those barriers, and connecting them to resources that can help them in their recovery. Um, Again, for volunteers, really maintaining and nurturing their own personal recovery in order to model what that looks like for, or what that sounds like to the people that they're going to be calling. Um, and again, I had shared before about, you can share your own experience, just make sure that that person is open to hearing about it. What we don't want to do is we don't want to preach to people about your own particular pathway to recovery. Meaning that if my pathway is a 12-step program, some people just aren't interested in hearing about it, or they've had a bad experience and they just aren't interested in going to a meeting. But that doesn't mean that they don't need support, and that doesn't mean that in the future they might not be open. They might be open to going in the future. It's really about supporting them where they are, and making sure that they can feel connected to the larger recovery community. So, ethics and boundaries when it comes to being a telephone recovery support volunteer, there are boundaries. So, even though this is a peer program, there are boundaries that you should, uh, you know, adhere with. Oh, I see Brenda is on. I'm going to make Brenda a presenter. Hold on, give me just a second here. Stacy showed me how to do it, but there we go. Let's see. Okay, excellent. And I'm going to talk about boundaries in just a second for volunteers. Again, confidentiality. So this is a non-clinical service. Um, you know, your volunteers are volunteers. They're not clinicians. They're not 12-step sponsors. They're just people in recovery that are interested in giving back and helping another person. So we'll talk a little bit about how people are going to sign up to receive these calls. But regardless of how people are referred to this service, the calls are confidential. Um, so I don't want, so in Connecticut, we have a lot of different organizations that will refer somebody to these calls. But when we go over the consent form, you can see that people are actually self-referred. So even though they may have been, they may have found out about our particular program from a treatment organization or from a probation officer or somebody like that, they are signing themselves up to receive the calls. So we never share any information about somebody that we're calling with that particular referral source. Like I said, treatment or probation or somebody like that. The only time we'd share something with somebody is if we had a formal release of information from them. So the information about calls should only be discussed with staff or other volunteers to assist in supporting the recovery. So, you know, you shouldn't be gossiping about the a call that you had with somebody, or anything like that. So the recovery should feel safe sharing what's going on with them, knowing that it'll be kept confidential. So does anybody have uh, any questions about this part about the confidentiality?
No questions. Are you able to hear me? This is Sheila from the Empowerment Center.
Oh, excellent. Hi, Sheila. I can hear you.
Yay. All right. Wonderful. We're all here. Thank you. No
Okay,
questions.
excellent. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Let's see if I can find my stupid mouse here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So again, earlier I talked about boundaries and ethics for the volunteers. So, boundaries are going to protect both you and the person that you're calling from harm. Again, always clarify your role as a volunteer. You're not a clinician, you're not a professional, you're just somebody, you know, you're just a fellow person in recovery that is looking to help. So you can't personally provide housing or transportation, sponsorship, or socialization for a recovery. So this comes up from time to time where you may develop a relationship with a person that you're calling, and that person may say, oh, I can really talk to you. Could you be my sponsor? Or hey, could you take me to a meeting? You know, that really isn't what this program is about. So you can provide information for that person. You can give them a list of meetings in their area, or um, things like that, but you can't personally provide any type of transportation or sponsorship for a person. Um, when in doubt, always check with your recovery center staff, and really use them as a resource in kind of navigating the boundaries. So this happened very early on in the program. And again, I'm not sure how you are going to be rolling out this program and who you're going to offer it to. But volunteers may end up in meetings with people that they call. If that happens, it's okay to acknowledge this if that person initiates the conversation. But you never want to just walk up to somebody at a meeting and say, "Hey, I'm Rebecca. I've been the, you know, I'm a volunteer with TRS. I've been calling you for the last month." You know, so you don't really want to break their anonymity. You want to, um, you want to give that person the privacy that they deserve. And only if that person comes up to you and says, "Hey, are you the one that has been calling me, every week for telephone recovery support?" You can say yes if you feel comfortable, but if you don't, you don't have to say that that is you or not. A lot of times the volunteers will introduce themselves. Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm a volunteer with the Telephone Recovery Support Program. I'm just calling just to check in and see how your recovery is going. So we use first names, and again, we always clarify that we're volunteers. Um, if you happen to have a personal relationship with somebody that you're assigned to call, it's best to let another volunteer make that call instead of you. You know, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where the boundaries are blurred. So if there's a name that comes up and you think that you might know this person, I wouldn't be the one to make that call. So does that make sense? Thanks, Bobby Joe. Okay. Okay, so let's get to the actual papers and I apologize. I mean, this is blurry for me, so I'm sure that it's blurry for everybody else too. But this is just a snapshot of what a consent form looks like. So we don't ask for a lot of personal information from people, because it really doesn't matter. Uh, but everybody is different, so I understand if this program is being funded by uh, a grant or something where you might need to capture a little more information than we do. These forms that were provided are customizable, so you can kind of add and adjust how whatever works for your program. So again, we ask for name, date of birth, a phone, a cell phone number, referred by, and that's just because sometimes we have certain relationships with treatment providers, and again, we never we never share personal information, but I can provide reports sometimes, just a quick report saying that, hey, last month you referred, this many people to the telephone recovery support program. Out of that number, we're still calling this many, and this many are reporting that they're doing well in their recovery, right? So something like that. So that's very helpful, and that's really around, establishing those relationships with providers or other organizations that can benefit from this. But this is really about supporting that recovery. And again, I just do numbers. I don't do any personal information. Current housing type, address, city, state, gender. Again, that is, it depends on what you're looking for. The current housing, you could change that to maybe drug abuse if you're interested in learning something like that or gathering that kind of data. We try to make this as simple as possible. So you can see that we ask people to circle the time frame that they'd like to be called. And again, these calls are made when our recovery community centers are open. So our centers are open basically Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And that's how we got the time frames. We have Spanish speaking only. So we do have volunteers that speak Spanish that will make those calls. And then we have a little box there that says, do not leave message on answering machine. So somebody may be in a living situation where, they don't want other people to know their recovery status. So if that box is checked off, we won't leave a message on the machine. We just simply hang up. And again, the bottom part is that they are consenting. They're giving us permission to call them. So, they're granting permission for a volunteer from, whatever organization you're with to call weekly on the above telephone number to support me in my recovery. Each time the volunteer calls, they're going to ask me how my recovery is progressing, and they'll provide resources if I ask them. If at the time of the call they're in need of a detox or referral to a treatment program, the volunteer will help them find one. And at any time, they can opt out of this program. And all they would have to do is either tell the volunteer that they no longer want to be called, or you can provide a number, usually to, I would say, a staff, to a recovery community center staff member. You can provide that number, and if somebody doesn't want to receive the calls anymore, they can just call that number and say, take my name off the list. So does anybody have any questions about this consent form? People are really self-referred to the program. So even though they may have been referred by a treatment organization or probation or DCF, or I don't know what, Missouri Department of Children and Families, that's what we call it in Connecticut. But they're really self-referred. So if nobody has any questions, oh, one question. All right, so they're giving the consent. So they're the ones that are signing this form. So part of my role, when I was the telephone recovery support manager, is I went and did outreach to providers, and gave them these forms. I also emailed them to them and things like that. So when the forms come in, the forms are faxed in, and that's when we start calling people. Well, you could probably do that too. Um, we we have a. I talked to um, I talked to Brenda about this. So we have a web-based software that we use for this, and uh, you know, part of that is that we're able to have a web form. So if somebody goes onto our website, this form comes up electronically, and they're able to fill it out electronically. Um, I'm not sure if you could do this with the paper form, you know, but you might be able to do that. But when it shows up electronically, instead of having a date and a signature at the bottom, there's a box that gets checked that just says, by checking this box, I acknowledge that I'm consenting for these calls, or something along that line. So you could probably set up something like that as well as the paper forms. So I'm going to move to the next slide if it's okay. Okay, so the contact script. Okay, so this is also something that can be customized. It's really, what do you feel is important, and sometimes it's about your funders, right? So let's look at the initial contact. So, hello, my name is Rebecca. I'm calling. I always say I'm a volunteer calling from CCAR, the Telephone Recovery Support Program. Uh, and this is the first time you call. So we're going to be calling you once a week to check in and see how your recovery is going. Do you have any questions? I always let them know a little bit about the program. So just because somebody fills out that form doesn't mean they really understand what the program is, right? So a lot of times I have to explain it. I'm a volunteer, I'm a person that's in recovery myself. I'm just going to call you once a week just to check in and see how you're doing. At any time, just, you can tell me not to call, and I'll just take your name off the list, right? So part of that initial contact would be kind of the questions that you might want to collect data on, such as, are you comfortable with sharing what your drug of choice was? I don't use quite that language anymore. I say drug of use instead of drug of choice. So this is an older form. And again, you can change this. You can change this however you want to. But really, it's more about, so how is their recovery going? So how's it going? How's your recovery going? And really about listening to that person and providing them encouragement and resources if they need it, right? And again, it's kind of spelled out here, um, but I think once you start making the calls, it gets pretty uh, intuitive, right? So a lot of times the volunteers will be, they'll ask me what the typical call sounds like, but it's different every time. What I say is usually the typical call is somewhere around no longer than 5 minutes, right? And it's just that check in with somebody, making sure that making sure that they're okay. How's things going? Give them a chance to talk about what's going on with them. Sometimes people, even though they may have support in their life, um, it's difficult to talk to people about uh, you know what's going on with them unless it's somebody else in recovery, right? So if somebody is, going back to their family or their loved one, it's hard to share about having cravings, right? Because if you talk about it, your loved ones or your family might think that you're going to relapse, right? But we know that it's helpful to talk about things like that. So this is really where this kind of program is successful and is helpful for people because you are able to talk about things like that because, somebody else in recovery can relate to that. So even though the initial contact and the wrap up and the ongoing contact is spelled out, um, you can make this how you want it. Does anybody have any question around this?
We're good here.
Okay. I want to just quickly share too that this program is for people with alcohol and substance use disorders or people with addiction, right? Um, Not necessarily for people with mental health challenges, although some people are co occurring. We understand that. But how I talk about it, at least in Connecticut, is if you have somebody that doesn't have that addiction piece in there, then this probably isn't the program for them. You know, we do call people that have co-occurring disorders, but if somebody just has a mental health challenge or whatever, it's usually not. This isn't usually the program for them. There's other there's other telephone supports for people that is geared just towards mental health. I don't know if you guys plan on using this for both or whatever. But if you do plan on using it for uh, mental health only, then just make sure that your volunteers know how to support somebody around that. I think in the training packet that we sent, there is something in there around if you think somebody is suicidal, right? So you might be talking to somebody as a volunteer and the person on the other line you know may say something that makes you wonder if this person is going to hurt themselves or is suicidal, right? As a volunteer, what I tell the volunteers is to please give the phone to a staff member. We don't train our volunteers to know how to assess if somebody is suicidal. So if they have a question around that, then I train the volunteers to give the phone to a staff member. That's really kind of the best way to handle that. And we've been doing this for 13 years now, and I think that has only come up maybe 3 or 4 times in the 13 years. And none of it has been serious. I think even out of that 3 or 4 times, only one time did we have to call like a crisis service and send somebody out to check on that person. But it can come up. So I just, I like to make sure that our volunteers at least know what to do if that ever comes up. So let me move on to the next slide. Okay, so this contact log is built on the previous sheet, right? So the date of the call, able to contact, yes or no, number of attempts in recovery, recovery supports used, whether or not that person relapsed. If they did, were you able to assist them? And then just a couple quick comments. So we have everybody, or we used to when we did this with the paper form, is we had everybody set up in their own folder, right? So we had, manila folders, and each folder was a person. And we sorted the folders through uh, day of the week and the time that they wanted to be called. The volunteer fills out this part right here. Um, and what's important about this is really around if they were able to contact. So, say for instance, it's Monday and it's 9 o'clock, right? I'm a volunteer. I'll come in, I'll find a pile of folders that say Monday at 9 o'clock, and then I'll start calling. If I contact that person's folder is going to go back into the Monday at 9 o'clock because we're going to call them in exactly 1 week, right? If I'm not able to contact them, then that person's folder would go into the next day's calls. We're going to try to call them until we make contact, right? Um, Most of the time, it's okay to try calling them the next day, but it really depends on the volume, right? So if you have a lot of people that you're calling, you might want to wait 2 days until you try to reach that person again. But if you're only calling, a small number of people at first, it's okay to try them every day until you make contact. What we also did too was we did 10 attempts, but you could do more, right? So after 10 attempts of trying to reach somebody, we would discharge them from the program. But 10 attempts used to take us, because we didn't do it every day, we did it every other day. So usually 10 attempts would take us a good three to 4 weeks, right? We figured if we weren't able to contact somebody in a month, then they probably didn't want to be contacted, right? Now, sometimes we would hear from that person again, and if we did, we simply would reactivate them and we would start calling them again. But you know, it really depends on it depends on how many times you want to try to reach somebody. We we did the 10 attempts, but it can be more depending on the program. Does anybody have any questions about this form? Um, and again, it says leave message, yes or no. So it's right on the top here because that's important. You don't want to leave a message for somebody that had no on the consent form. Again, because we don't want to break somebody's confidentiality around that. So does anybody have any questions around the folders and things like that? How to set this up in your center? Can I ask if are you guys using landlines? Are you guys using cell phones? Where exactly in the center do you plan on making these calls? I can see David is typing. Okay, at a desk with a computer. Excellent. Yep. If you have a computer there, that'll really help finding resources as well. Okay, excellent. Now I can't hear you, Brenda, but um, I also suggest too that that you have kind of like a dedicated kind of private area for this, and that if at all possible, it is close to a staff member's office. So if one of the volunteers does need support, that they could somehow, get the staff's attention, or maybe get another volunteer to go get the staff for them. Um, yes, I can send you the service contact log, no problem. What I'll do is I'll send it to Brenda, and then Brenda can send it to you if that's okay. Okay, excellent. So let me move on. Oh, I think I skipped one. Oh, maybe I didn't. So um, just quickly, so this service contact log, the Excel spreadsheet that is in the packet is built on this service log. So what we did was we had the volunteers kind of fill out this log, but a staff member was the one that put it into the Excel spreadsheet. Um, it usually didn't take a very long time. So our Recovery Community Center staff, it only is staffed by 2 people. So we have the Recovery Community Center manager, and then we have a volunteer coordinator. Many times, a volunteer coordinator was the one that, you know, put the put the contact logs into the Excel spreadsheet. And it didn't take very long at all, maybe, an hour a week or something like that. As this program builds, though, I had talked with Brenda about, going to a web-based kind of program. I know for us, it was very helpful. We call somewhere between 500 and 600 people a week, so having everything that was web-based and it made running the program a lot easier than trying to keep track of folders and things like that. But it's going to take some time to get the program up and running and to get people enrolled, which kind of leads me to my next slide, right? So how are you going to market this program? This is just an example of how to market the program and kind of where to market it to. Um, this program it's really not for the people that are coming to your center, right? Except for your volunteers. If people are already coming to your center, then they probably wouldn't benefit too much from having a call as well, right? This program is really for people that don't have other types of support. So that's why, I used to do outreach to treatment providers and say, listen, this is a free program. Your clients, when they leave, they can sign up to receive these weekly calls. And it's a great kind of support for them. Um, when people get out of treatment or whatever, whether or not they're going to outpatient or they are involved with a support group, um, this is just an extra support. They may be going to a location where they're not close to meetings or types of formal support. They may be, housebound due to, maybe medical issues. But this is a simple program. All they have to do is pick up the phone when we call. Simple as that. Calls are outgoing. Although, the volunteers can have people, if somebody needs extra help or extra support, your volunteers can have, people call one of the centers or encourage people to come into one of the centers. That's very helpful as well. So uh, I think for providers and for other community partners that it's a great program. It's a simple program and it helps people. That's all. That's all really you have to say when you're talking about this. Um, and again, we've been doing this for 13 years, and it not only helps the people that we call, but it's great for our volunteers. It gives them a purpose. I see people really start to flourish in their own recovery. So that's why I'm passionate about this. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, excellent. Let me move on. I think I have just one or two more slides. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. So how do you know if this program is working, right? So I have a simple kind of survey that I do, or I shouldn't say that I do, that our volunteers will do. Probably I do it once or twice a year, right? And it's a quick survey and it measures recovery capital. So if I'm able to show that the people that are receiving phone calls are able to build their recovery capital, then I can show the efficacy of the program. So I can show that the program is working because people are building recovery capital. So this is just an example of the recovery capital survey. And I'm not recreating the wheel, right? And this survey is based on a study um, that I you know from below from William White and a few other people. But I kept it simple, and I think it's only about 10 questions. But this is just an example. So I generally attend to any illness or medical condition that I have. And you can score it too. So after you score it, if the scores are going up, then people are building recovery capital. So it's a really quick kind of thing. Funders love to see this kind of stuff, but it's also a good kind of, snapshot of your program too, because we want to know whether we're really helping people, right? So we have the narratives. We know that we do because people tell us that we're helping them by calling. But this is just a quick, uh, this is a quick kind of survey that I can kind of show more. So again, you can do something similar. You can do this one. I'm more than happy to share it. It's not proprietary or anything like that. But it kind of hits on some of the again, physical, psychological, coping, housing and safety. It hits on the big categories of recovery capital. So this is a really quick kind of survey that I do. And again, with anything else, the better trained your volunteers are on this, the more that we can get people to participate, right? So if the volunteers are able to talk about this kind of quick survey and just say, listen, are you interested in taking this quick survey? It'll only take you a couple minutes, and it's just a way for us to see that our program is working. That's all they have to say. They don't have to explain it really any more than that, unless somebody asks, right? So does anybody have any question about this survey? Okay, excellent. Okay. Okay. So part of the TRS package from CCAR includes, I believe it's a year access to our supplemental webinars. So, these webinars aren't specifically for telephone recovery support, but they can be helpful for your volunteers. So, stages of change and motivational interviewing, cultural competence, building recovery capital, sharing your story, stages of recovery. So, you guys all should have access to these webinars. And again, they can be very helpful in addition to the regular training for your volunteers to kind of help them with TRS. Some of these are around recovery coaching, but stages of change and motivational interviewing is, that's a great training, not just for recovery coaching. It really is, it can transfer to TRS very, very easily. as well as cultural competence and building recovery capital. So some of the questions that I've gotten um, when I've gone and done outreach, especially from clinicians, is, well, do you do gender specific calling? Meaning, do females call females and males call males? No, we don't. You know, we don't do that just because our call volume is too high. And this is a volunteer program, so I'm more concerned about getting enough volunteers to make the calls than having females call females and males call male. Um, we haven't really ran into any issues around that. But if if somebody that we're calling does request that only that they only be called by a male or they only be called from a female, we do our best to kind of you know to make that happen. Um, that's another reason why we set our TRS kind of station up near a staff office, is so that staff can kind of, I don't want to say monitor, but they're there, they can kind of hear conversations and things like that. Um, and if a volunteer needs some more training, they can have that volunteer do some more training. So again, these are just webinars that can help your volunteers, or either around telephone recovery support or other things that you're doing in the center. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, I think we're almost done. Oh. So I talked a little bit about, gender specific text, email, frequency, data collection, outcomes, partnerships. So texting and email, if you guys were using smartphones or whatever, you could offer texting, right? So I always had this kind of idea, and we didn't end up doing it, although we may in the future. So how many people get a text or an email from their dentist or from their doctor saying that, oh, don't forget about your appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m., right? It's kind of annoying, but sometimes it's kind of, sometimes it's good because, yeah, I did forget all about it, right? So I had this idea at one time about sending like a little reminder or texting a little reminder to people saying, oh, don't forget, we're going to call you, telephone recovery support is going to call you tomorrow at 3 o'clock or something like that. So there are ways to use technology and kind of, support people. I don't know whether you could do this program um, by text or email. I think that you lose some of the kind of, the essence of the program, because it's really about, talking or having that connection with somebody. And I'm not so sure you could get quite the same connection by just texting or something like that. But I could be wrong. I think that, some of the younger people may be able to connect just as well through text as, by phone. So, again, this program you can customize it to make it work for your organization. I talked about gender specific frequency. So maybe you guys can call people more than once a week. You know, you can definitely you can do that. So say you want to try to call people um, twice a week, 3 times a week. You know, again, the reason why we don't is just because we have a high volume of people that we call, and this is strictly a volunteer run program. Again, the data collection, um, that can be customized as well. I talked a little bit about we use a web-based software for this, but when you're just starting out, you would be fine with the Excel spreadsheet and the paper forms. So if you do have somebody that is savvy with an Access database, you could try to build an Access database instead of using the Excel spreadsheet. Um, but it's really it if you have somebody that can do that, then that would be great. Again, outcomes, it's about supporting people and it's also about your volunteers. This is really a program to help your volunteers as much as it is a program to help people in recovery and building partnerships. Again, that little report that I provide to some of the larger treatment organizations that do refer people. I know that they like getting that information. So building partnerships with you know other community organizations is great. And again, it's about keeping it simple. Um, this isn't recovery coaching. This is telephone recovery support. So it's a different level of engagement with people. And we do both in our center. So we have volunteer recovery coaches, but we have just volunteer telephone recovery support people. And we keep them separate, even though, some of the skills do crossover. Um, I think that keeping this simple is the way to really sustain this program. So I believe this is the last slide. So does anybody have any questions? Okay. Looks like everybody is good. I want to thank everybody. I'm not crazy about doing webinars. Uh, so Bobby Joe asked about the service log. Okay. So it looks like some people have the service log and some don't. I will make sure that Brenda has it and she can send it to whoever doesn't. And again, let me type in my contacts. Oops, let me go back here so people have my email and they can email me directly with any questions. Let's see. So my email is rebecca@ccar.us. So David says that they've been doing monthly phone calls. Should we switch to weekly? Um, it's really up to you, David. Um, whether or not you want to switch to weekly is totally up to you. Are you finding that you're reaching a lot of people monthly um, or not? I wouldn't think that there's a high risk, but if there's a need for, if people are saying to you, hey, I wish you guys could call more often than once a month, then I would try to make that happen. Oh, okay. So getting the volunteer base up enough to do weekly. That is challenging. Again, it's always so. What helps us with our telephone recovery support program is that we have a schedule, right? So our volunteers at each of our centers are scheduled, and we have this whiteboard that's set up with day of the week uh, and role at the center. So not just telephone recovery support, but say front desk receptionist or, somebody to help with computers. So any role in the center, that volunteers do is up on this volunteer weekly schedule. And it's really helpful to have that for telephone recovery support because I can look at that, and if I have a volunteer scheduled, to do TRS calls on, say, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it makes a huge difference. And also, so say it's Wednesday and my telephone recovery support volunteer doesn't show up, I can get somebody to fill that spot or something like that. So it's very helpful for us in the recovery community centers to have a working schedule that we can see. But again, it's always making sure that we have enough volunteers to make the calls because I think, uh, you know, one of the worst things that can happen is if somebody is signed up to receive a call and nobody calls them, right? But we do have staff, and um, staff can make calls as well. So we've had to do that. Okay, so if nobody has any more questions, I'm going to end right now. But I provided my email address. Feel free to reach out to me, and I will make sure that Brenda does have the contact log, and she can send it to anybody that doesn't have it. Again, thank you, everybody, and I wish you guys the best in starting this program. And again, it's something I'm passionate about because I really think it really helps um, volunteers and the people that we call. So it's a win-win. So thank you, everybody.